Now, can you see me?
I can see and hear you now. How's it going?
Good. Nice mustache.
Thank you so much. Thanks for acknowledging it without having to have me bring it up. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Long Form Conversations, the podcast where we talk about long form improv. I am your host, David, and you may notice something special about this setup. This is actually going to be a special travel edition of the podcast. And as the travel edition, we also have a very special guest outside of LA as well. This is going to be a legendary improviser. He is a
Ugh.
teacher, a coach, someone that I'm sure he's an author. There's so many ways that you may have seen or heard of this improviser. This is the great drum roll, Billy Merritt.
Yes, I am the great drum roll Billy Merritt. I'm gonna put that in my all my titles now.
Yeah,
Yeah. Hi, David. How are you?
good, good. How's it going? And I just
Good.
want to say it's funny and ironic that this is I'm traveling, but I didn't come to you. You didn't come to me. We're just in
We
two
actually
separate
you went
cities.
actually went farther apart than closer together.
Yeah, I figured if we are gonna do this remotely, I have to be as remote as possible. So I'm in Seattle and you're in Florida,
Yeah. West Palm,
which
down
is
close to Miami.
yeah, so closer
Yeah.
to the coast. How's the weather for you? Because tell you what, I love Seattle. It's a great city, but being a California boy, I
Yeah.
can't take the moisture and the rain any
It's
longer.
oddly enough, and it's wrong to complain as the whole nation is coded, but it has been cloudy for a month here. We can't go to the pool.
No,
The water's too cold. Uh, it's I
they
think it got
must
down
do
to
something about that.
yeah, it got down to 49. I did. I joined a gym, a nightmarish gym. So now I'm working out in a gym instead of being in the pool, which I'd prefer.
But you're going to the heated pool of the gym. Is that what it is?
No, no, they don't. I was choosing between two gyms. One had a
Uh-huh.
pool and a hot tub, and the other had a free massage chair and hydro massage. I
Uh,
had to be honest with myself. I'm going to do the massage chair more than I am going to do the hot tub.
sure.
And
At
notice
some
how
point in your life, yeah,
none
go
of
ahead.
that had to do with working out. It's just which one is more
Right.
comfortable.
Which one has the better amenities?
Yeah.
Great. Well, how's everything in Florida? How's your life and also how's your improv life there?
It's good. It's good. I've been here about 4 months, I think, so I was
Mhm.
acclimating. I came here to help my mom out. She's just turned 83. Bless her heart. And she
And
just
her
joined my
Sart.
gym. Bless her sart. Bless her sart. She just joined my gym, so she's gonna muscle in on all my territory. So she's doing great, which allows me to free myself up, and I'm doing some more teaching online like crazy.
Hmm.
So I do 4 or 5 classes through Will Hines, UCB, and a couple other people that I know from all over, and working on building a little Herald bubble here in South Florida. This is where I got my
Amazing.
improv start, actually, here in South Florida, this exact city. So I feel like I've come full circle. 30 years ago, I started here and realized I had to get out of this town if I wanted to do improv. So I moved to New York. And I've come back, and there's some good people here. Uh, it just tends to be more short form and not as much long form, but the short form is really good. And I think they
Yeah,
can do really good long form. So I'm working on changing the mindset, hopefully, down here. And there's
that's
a lot
great.
of good minds. There's a lot of good minds.
Yeah.
So.
It's like one of those sports stories. You're like Gordon Bombay coming back to coach your hometown team.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and you got a great little setup here. You mentioned you're doing a lot of different Zoom or rather online classes,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Doing online classes. Just started teaching live here.
Hmm.
My first Herald class, I did a Herald workshop. And it's like, we're going to talk later about New York and Heralds, but it's like, force people to like the Herald. That's what I'm going to do. And once they get
Hmm.
addicted to that, everything else just explodes. So, I'm doing that and still doing voiceovers, still working on every day. I try to upgrade my voiceover capabilities. And it's just, I'm so stupid. I just can't figure out how to set it up to make it sound better. And I keep working on it. How's
Well, thanks so
everything
much
over
for.
there?
Oh, everything's great.
And where are you playing? What are you doing? Are you doing any specific shows and where?
Yeah, so we just with Will, they just launched their new Herald teams. I just got put on one, so that's
Oh,
exciting. Getting a chance to,
awesome.
um, yeah, jump into that next season. My team, Glass Clown, has been winning cage match. We did two
Yeah.
in a row, so that's pretty exciting. Yeah, and then just doing indie shows here and there.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I'm so happy you're at Will's class with those guys. Those are great teachers.
Yeah,
We're all going to Edinburgh, Liverpool, and London together at the end of the month. Uh,
is that Fringe Fest? Is that an improv festival?
Edinburgh Improv Festival is
Oh,
at the end of February. And then we're all, for some reason, going to Liverpool, where we've, I guess since COVID, we kind of connected with these people.
yeah.
And there's a theater there called Atomic Theater. And then we're going to London for FA, Free Associates Theater, which has been around for a while. It's the closest thing to UCB as far as Herald Night and stuff like that. So we're doing workshops and shows in all three cities.
Great. If you have it written down somewhere, if you want to email me later, would be happy to, promote that for you.
Yeah, can I just very quickly share the first my first note about you, David?
Yeah.
I think I was post pandemic at a someone's house. You were rehearsing, and
Hmm.
you all invited me over.
Yeah.
And this is your improv strength that I saw you in that room. I think you came in a little late with an entire Chipotle burrito,
Yes,
and
I
you
did.
ate the entire thing and then got up. And I went, damn, I would be in bed or in the bathroom after that. That is amazing. So one of your improv strengths is you can eat an entire burrito, then get on stage. That's enjoy these days, my friend.
Thank you so much. Yeah, if there's
Yeah.
any strength that I have, it is my iron gut.
That's your
Shrinking.
strength. Play from your strength. Anytime you can eat a
Uh,
burrito on stage, do it, do it, do it.
you know what? That'll be my thing. That's gonna be my
Yeah.
what sets me apart. We're gonna go ahead and jump into our first segment now, which is
Oh.
going to be Improviser Syndrome.
All right. Do you have
So
any sort of music for this or?
I'll be adding it in post.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay,
my
good.
sound, the guy who normally plays in the background could not come to Seattle with me.
Could you hum the music so I just get a feel?
It's just gonna be like, oh, oh.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So imagine that part
Got
plus
it.
Improviser Syndrome.
Ha 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 ha.
So this is a segment where we get to hear about your improv journey,
Hmm.
talking about your origin story and also how you came up and how you felt as you're going through it. Now, this is going to be interesting because most people that I have as guests, their improv journey is, maybe like a 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
But you've got quite a legacy. So I think I want to focus more on the earlier years. And I think later on, with our segment talking about history, we can dive more into the,
Oh, okay, sure.
once. So I guess let's talk about like up to the point where you felt like confident. And this may have happened, even
Yeah.
pre UCB. This might have been something that happened during like theater in high school or something.
It's
Let's
it's
start at
an
the beginning.
interesting, yeah. I was confident before I went to UCB, which is my big problem, huge problem. So I started as in acting down here, down in South Florida. And the great thing about South Florida, because there are so many senior citizens, there's lots of plays, so there's lots of opportunity. People still want to see 42nd Street and My Fair Lady. So there's a good training for acting down here. But I discovered improv myself and a couple friends of mine, and we loved it. We did our own group down here without any lessons. I think we used the Viola Spolaine book to get going, and we really got to the point where, all right, if we want to do this, and I know my acting teacher at the time says, Billy, you have to go to New York. You can't be here anymore. So we had this decision to make: do we go to Chicago and study improv, or do we go to New York and study acting and improv? So we went to New York.
Did you feel
Uh,
like you were like equal parts, both equal parts, like improv
Yes.
comedian and then
Yeah.
also dramatic actor?
I feel I got into improv through the acting side, not the comedy side. Although I was always Mr. Funny. Trust me, I'm
Mhm.
hilarious. So when we moved up to New York, UCB hadn't been. This is in the mid '90s, so there was no New York, or there was no UCB in New York at that time. So we joined a theater, and this is our first structured theater called National Improv Theater. Doesn't exist anymore. And there's the first time we went into structure, and they did this great idea of teaching every class. You do 2 classes a week, one on scene work, one on
Mhm.
technique. And they did a mid form type of improv, to call it anything else, or a presentational shortish form, if you will. So it was really good for actors. It was really good. It taught you a little bit about improv. Turns out they were Scientologists. We didn't know going in. We thought they were very efficient and very clean,
I
but
didn't
we
know they
didn't know
even
they were
had
Scientologists.
Scientology back then.
Oh yes, yeah. Back
I
in the
guess I didn't.
'90s, Dave. Yeah, things were rough back then.
I you
We
know
all we were doing our improv steam powered back then.
no, I guess what
Uh,
I meant is I guess I only know it from John Travolta and
oh
Tom
yeah,
Cruise.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
would just figure like, oh yeah, I guess it must have preceded them. It must have been a whole
yeah.
thing. It must have
You
started
know,
then.
who was in my improv class back then? Giovanni Ribisi.
Oh, the
Know who that is?
Ribisi.
Yeah, he
Yes,
was a
he's on Gone in
Scientologist
60
at the time.
Seconds.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
probably a more recent movie I could pick, but
Yeah. So, anyways, they went belly up because they took everybody's money and left town. Classic theater. So we're
classic
kind of
Scientology.
classic Scientology theater move. So we had a group and we're kind of on our own, still wanting to learn. And it's kind of like where we were before. We didn't have the structure. And we've heard about Harold, and we were asking people who were coming in from Chicago to teach us the Harold, but nobody in New York was teaching it. Enter UCB. And it just exploded at that time. And I do remember my very first workshop. It was with Matt Besser, and it was before they had a theater or anything or any class. And I believe the first note he said to me is, "You're improvising with blinders on. You're not seeing the whole scene." And
Mhm.
I just remember walking out, goes, "Who the hell does this guy think he is?
Yeah,
I'm funny."
at this
Yeah,
point, what how long were you doing like how well first of all, actually how long were you in New York when the UCB came in?
probably a couple years, at least 2 years. And I've been doing it a couple years before that. So I'm probably at that 3 to 4 year mark where you feel you're good and you're ready to,
Mhm.
but we also knew we needed to learn something.
Right. And what was the
We
reputation
didn't.
like for UCB? Like, because I can imagine if you've been there for 2, 3 years, it's almost kind of like who's these like the new
Yeah.
kids on the block coming in.
Yeah, for me it was that. Who are these guys?
Mhm.
My friend Michael Delaney, who ended up teaching as well, was a member of the Swarm with me. Knew of them from Chicago because he knew the improv scene in Chicago a lot better than I did. And I remember going to see their first show. And it was at a bar, and it's their
Mhm.
ASCAT show. I saw their sketch show, and the sketch show was good, but this is their the ASCAT show was the flagship show, and I still remember to this day. My bar, we're at the bar. My beer is at the in the bar. I turned to watch a show, and I never drink my beer. I
Oh
watched the
wow.
entire show, and I went, "How is it that simple? How are they playing themselves yet still improvising bizarre characters?" And I remember the first game of the scene that I recognized was, I think it was Amy Poehler setting up. This is when. Uh, Hillary Clinton's book "It Takes a Village" came out,
Mhm.
and the running game at ASCAT was this whole village was bothering this one girl because it takes a village, and everywhere she went in her life, this village kept showing up, and it's like that's so simple. How'd they do that?
Mhm.
And that was a like defining moment. It's like, oh, I get it now. I must be humble and learn from these people, and just started doing those shows. And it's like I could list a list of like 10 different watershed moments from that moment on where I just kicked it up another notch, another notch, another notch. And they were all with the original UCB4. And they all taught me something that made me go, oh, one more notch. And what was amazing is they all teach and come from comedy completely different.
Mhm.
They weren't as like-minded as you thought. When each workshop was different, but they all agreed on this thing called the game.
So
And that was it. Yeah.
So how did you feel as a student then? Because for me, one of the benefits I had is that there was a whole school, a whole
Yeah,
curriculum. So more or less every teacher is approaching it the same. So that
yeah,
way there's some consistency. But for you, I imagine taking a class with Polar, then Besser, then Roberts,
yeah,
and Walsh, you're probably like getting some
yeah.
whiplash or some
And I
confusion.
think that's why if there weren't game of scene, if they weren't teaching game, there would be whiplash. They would be all
Hmm.
over the place. But I think the defining factor is once you have that comedy language, the game,
Hmm.
you can come from anywhere. Amy was attack a scene and don't let it breathe. Jump right in. Besser was a premise keeper. That's his
Hmm.
motivation. Ian Roberts is a human robot cyborg who's the most logical person on the stage and heightens
Yeah.
unbelievably. And Matt Walsh has a little, he came through, what was the theater? Oh, I can't, I'm just drawing a blank. In Chicago, not Second City, not IO.
Annoyance?
Yes, annoyance. He had an annoyance style. He was the one that always liked to play with people who didn't have any improv experience. He kind of liked that little chaos feel to the scene. So they all have these different points of view, but they can all play game. So
Hmm.
the that was the unifying factor. But I'm feeling it's a lot easier now to get through the system than it was then. You're really on your own, kind of feeling it out back then.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier too, you had this confidence. So, just for some other folks that come into improv, maybe they have had a theater experience. Maybe they are like the funniest person in their
Yeah.
friend group. What was it like being told what you're doing is like, could be improved or could be
Yeah.
different?
Well, I always say in class, comedy is a defensive art form. We're all kind of
Mm,
protecting our own comedy. We don't like to be told we're not funny. And that's exactly kind of what happens as you're breaking it down and putting it back up together. The big argument, and I learned it through the Swarm, and I think I always give that speech in class about that moment. The Swarm was like the first team to graduate out of the Herald and do their own weekend show that kind of created the template that you see at UCB, the future groups and shows. And our argument was constantly just because they're laughing doesn't mean you're doing it right. And
mm,
there's two sides of that. There's that side. The other side is no, we're comedians. Lighten the fuck up, Charlie, and just play. And that's where I was coming from. Because we're getting a laugh. We don't need to be do all this. I guess now I'm coming from the point of in the back of my mind, you don't have to do all that extra work. But in reality, yes, you do.
yeah.
Yeah,
So, as you were coming up and as you were taking these classes, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm guessing there was no 101, 201, or was there? Or
no, not at first. Yeah,
how did
I
you track
took.
your progress? You
Yeah,
know?
I took any at that time there were no levels. There was no theater. They were
Mhm.
teaching out of a place called what is it? Solo Arts Theater. It's a fourth floor walk up. There's an elevator, but you don't want to take the elevator. And they each taught a workshop, and sometimes they would split up the workshop or something like that. And then all of us took second rounds. The people that kind of were there at the time wanted to take each of those teachers. Then we take a second round with those. So by the time we were coming back to do a second round, I think is when they started giving it more of a structure. I was there at the meeting that they had. It was on the roof of the Solo Arts, and by this time there were about 60 or 70 people kind of attached to the workshops, and they were still doing shows. And they announced this is when they had their sketch show up and running, that they're opening up a theater. And right about that time is when they had to have structured classes. And at that time, Armando Diaz came from Chicago to help teach.
Mhm.
Also, Ali Faranakian was already here. I think he was writing on SNL, and he was teaching. And then they were just started bringing in like Kevin Mullaney, all these people that they
Right.
knew that were more teachers than they were performers that kind of helped set the curriculum up. So it was interesting. Lots of
So,
trial and error.
so at this time, are you were they also giving performance opportunities, or were you strictly
Yeah.
like a student? Okay.
The first show that I think they put up was called Harold and the Turquoise Dingo. And it was indie groups at that time. We were I had a group. By the way, Matt Walsh said he always loves collecting improv troupe names. Glass
Yeah,
Clown. That's a good one.
thank you.
Just so you know, that's what he would say. And he really fell in love with me and Michael Delaney because our first comedy troupe was called the Comedy Squad. And the joy in his eyes when he heard that was became embarrassing. And then when we were at was National Improv Theater, we were a group called Lost Footage, and we loved that name. It came
That's a good
to
name.
yeah, Linda was one of our Linda Delaney was one of our members, and she had a dream, and it came to her in her dream, and we all went, "Yes, Linda, that's our name." And then that kind of fell apart, and we were like, "Putting, what about you? You want to play?" And we would try to get up a team to try and do these heralds that they were just learning, and they would let us do half the show would do indie type heralds,
Mhm.
and the other half they would try either a new form that they were working on or their sketches that they're working on for their show. One or the other.
Do you remember how
So
you felt or what your first Herald was like? Because I think for a lot of us, because there's so many rules and so many
yeah,
different things, how did you feel about it?
uh, uh, I thought it was fine, in retrospect, it was not. During those indie shows, I think that's when, by the way, I didn't finish at the end of that, the swarm kind of found itself. Amy actually put us
Yes.
together. She said she wants to work on a forum. You guys are on different teams. You all should be one group together. And that was
Mm.
me, Dave Bloomingfeld, Michael Delaney, not Linda, Katie Roberts, Ian Roberts' wife, and a couple of, I don't need to go through all these names. You get it. Only the important people I'll talk about. I was in the group.
Yeah.
And we were still doing heralds, but not well. And we had learned that you could do any kind of opening.
Mhm.
And I remember there was one time Andy Secunda, who was on our team, was on another team, and they did an opening that was based on X-Files that took 45 minutes. The opening took 45
Oh,
minutes.
okay.
So there were some, we're all trying to invent new stuff because we saw UCB inventing new stuff. It's like, well, we want to do it. Well, you know what? Let's get the first opening down before you do all that. So it was a little crazy. And the shows, the Heralds were just plotting. They were about 40, 45 minutes. People weren't editing. People were trying different things as far as openings go. And I remember one night, during one of those Herald nights, the Swarm had the last show, and by this time we kind of established ourselves as a pretty good group, kind of the best of group. And there wasn't enough time; we had to get out of there by 10 o'clock because at 11 there is a oil disco party, and they had to lay down the tarps. That's what we were told. Somebody else was renting out the theater where they lay down the tarps. Everybody puts on oil and discos. I don't know what that meant. I felt it was an orgy. I don't know. So Besser came up to us and says, "Guys, we only have 15 minutes. I don't know if you can do this." And we all went, "Again, this guy, watch this." And we went in there and we jumped on top of it, scene on top of scene. And
Mhm.
that was one of those moments where everything clicked. And it's like, oh, lean into the scenes, jump on the edit, anticipate it, as opposed to, yep, that's good, they're done, and I'll edit. So it kind of changed our whole focus there.
So at that point, Heralds were like 45 minutes, and this was the first time
Yeah,
you'd ever done like
yeah,
a
this is
15-minute set.
pre-theater. When they
Mhm.
put up their own Herald night. And by the way, as they started teaching and they started getting a formula, they started putting together Herald teams. And I think Amy and Matt got really high one night and came up with a bunch of names for teams, and they all had to come
Yeah.
out to these names: Klingon Rubber Party, Deep Space 12, because clearly you know what they were watching at that time.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I can't remember. Wormhole was another one. And since we were put together outside of that and the Swarm, we were a different group. But
You're the extra one.
they basically, all the teams that they put together through workshops and then
Mhm.
eventually starting getting a curriculum, they said, okay, you're the teams. Now we're going to do a Herald Night. And I feel they were following the IO template as far as that goes.
So for you to be selected, that wasn't a an audition process. That was just their, I guess, their student
Yeah.
body at that time.
Yeah, they just put them together. I think isn't that how WGIS does? Do they just put the teams together who are taking the workshops,
That's
or is
exactly
there?
right. So we just,
Yeah,
I think, taking from that as well.
yeah,
So they see who is consistent. I mean, I can't even say that I
yeah,
know, but it seems like they take who's consistent and who
yeah.
has been, putting in time and effort.
Yeah. Putting the time and effort, really talented. By the way, Dave, didn't you just make one of those teams?
Yeah, I did. So that's why I am.
Wow.
Wow, they must
Wow.
pick. They pick the most clever,
Wow.
the
You
smartest.
are Klingon rubber party. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a good way to start when you don't have like a theater or school. Yeah, we
Uh-huh.
got all these people. Let's put together a show.
So how
Yeah.
did you feel? Was that like a big honor for you, or was it kind
Yeah,
of like, well,
well,
we're
we
all doing
were
it?
put together differently. We were put together
Hmm.
before all that happened, the swarm.
Hmm.
Like I said, by that time, Amy was our coach. She put together a group that she wanted to do a specific form she wanted to work on. This is a time mark, is she got us all together. We came to her apartment where she was, really nice apartment at that time. Going, how does she afford this? And she handed us cassette tapes of Wu-Tang Clan, who we'd never
Mm.
heard of before. And it's like, we want to do an improv show like this. And it's like, okay. We had no idea. We were the whitest people that you know, and we failed her miserably. We did a couple shows. Claim to fame. Eugene Cadero was one of our uh, uh, DJs. We had real live
Hmm.
DJs on the set, and they would like mix music between scenes. And I think what she wanted from us is to sample this scene with that scene and mix them together
Oh, right,
a little
like
bit.
a
Yeah,
fader.
fade in and out. And the reason why we're called the swarm is she would keep yelling at us, I want you to swarm over that scene. Swarm, swarm, like swarm over that scene. And we do scenic painting. It says, we see this person's wearing this and that and this and that. Get in, get out as fast as you can. That's kind of where the origin came from. We were not good at that, so we kind of did Herald Night then, and we just
Yeah.
became a Herald team.
I noticed that back then, and kind of we might touch upon this more later on. We talk about
Yeah,
like the evolution of things, but right now, this time and these stories, everything sounds so experimental. It seems like there's a
yeah,
lot of big risks and a lot of big, trial and error things. How
yeah,
did that feel? Because nowadays people do tried and true forms. We try things that have we've been told work. So there's a higher percentage of successful shows because it's what we all are used to. But for you,
yeah,
you may be a great improviser, you may be doing great sets, but all of a sudden, hey, let's do this
yeah.
soundtrack slash like fading. It may not translate, or you do like a 45-minute opening that may not translate to the
Yeah,
audience.
we didn't know what bad or good was, so because we've not
Hmm.
seen bad, we've not seen good. I mean, so it was always exciting, you know.
Mm.
And I'm not going to say that at the end of that show, like we suck at this. That never was the feeling. But it really was like, let's try a new thing. And then we were starting getting. Amy was our first director, and then she moved on, obviously, and then Armando Diaz was our second director for the Swarm, and he was bringing more tried and true techniques and things coming from Chicago that really kind of kept us settled in.
Hmm.
But then also he was working on a form called Event Day, and we were practicing that out and this and that. So it's a mixture of two. And I see what you're saying. I think there's still one of the things that I got from him that I still believe is true is everything that's old again's new again's old again's new again. You're always going to find new ways of doing things. Try something that hasn't been done in a while, but with your perspective and see where it goes. And I think that's what Armando is teaching us.
Got it. Yeah, I guess that does make sense because I mean, that's not to say people aren't still experimenting. People are still trying to do new things or even
Yeah.
play around with different openings and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's
Like
very much true.
what's the opening du jour at Herald Night, like at WGIS or UCB?
I think I'm obviously maybe not qualified to like assess everybody, but I
Yeah.
would say that like the thing I see the most is the living room. I feel like that's a
Yeah.
you know this classic and it feels more natural and people seem to.
Yeah.
It's also like pretty entertaining and pretty presentational.
Yeah.
But obviously, you still have some monologues, some rants. But again, these are all again things that are tried and true. These are things that have already been
Yeah.
established.
Yeah.
I don't think everybody's been like, and I took that one class with you where you tried to have us mishmash things and have tried
Yeah.
different openings.
Yeah.
And I think that's great, but I think that's a level of risk that a lot of us maybe don't feel up to doing yet. So it's great that you had this culture of
Wow.
let's just give things a shot. Let's
Yeah,
just try
yeah,
it out. Versus us, it's just like let's play it safe. Let's do the pattern
yeah.
game
But
because we all
that
practice
was
it.
not just the beginning. That's always been UCB Herald teams trying new openings, trying stuff out. And it kind of cycles around. The living room is great, but my first instinct, as soon as you said that, in the back of my head goes lazy, because it's easy to do. But you said it
Right.
perfectly. It's tried and true. There's nothing wrong with the living room. It's perfect. But I would love to see a group nowadays try an invocation and see what they could pull out of it, or something like that, or an organic, and see
Yeah.
what your interpretation of an organic opening is now, as opposed to what it was then.
And I think you're also speaking to this like maybe like it's much more pure to improv, which is this
Yeah,
leap first and then catch yourself second. So
yeah,
you may not have a full premise. You may have a half idea. You may still be discovering it.
yeah,
Versus, I think nowadays everyone is so much more focused on. Look, we know we have to have a full premise. We have to have the initiation has to include the base
yeah,
reality and then usual. And sometimes you can't do that with a pattern game. You can't do that with an invocation
yeah.
because they're still being constructed.
Do you feel you don't have the freedom to fail?
That's a very interesting question. That's definitely something I
Yeah,
have to analyze and think about. I think at the end of the day, in spirit, I think we all know that improv is like failing. It's jumping
yeah,
out there with nothing. But I think there is this other side of I need to prove myself or I need to
yeah,
win over the audience, and that is where I think that fear of failure happens.
yeah. I
Especially with
think,
the Herald, I will say with this one last thing is because you have to continue it for the second and the third beat connections.
yeah,
That's where a lot of the dread comes in. If it was the a different form like a montage, I think there's much more for you to be like, let's try this out. Oh, that wasn't good, but we could
yeah,
just
yeah,
wipe it, never touch it again.
yeah. Yeah. I think that was the big thing at the very beginning at the UCB, was because we didn't have an audience. So we had the freedom to fail a lot more because we were trying new stuff out. As a matter of fact, I was in, and this is when they started working on those advanced type classes and shows that I love teaching, where they're developing a form. And Matt Walsh from Annoyance Theater came up with an idea called Robot TV. He did a couple shows
Mm-hmm.
that I really enjoyed doing. And the whole purpose of Robot TV is to do a television shows for robots who get high. That's what he told us. That's what it is. It's robots doing entertainment for robots. And meet humans, if they walk out, that's a victory. So we would do a show for 2 or 3 people, maybe 7 people at tops. If anybody walks out, we would all go beep beep beep, like we like as if we won. I don't think you could ever do that now. That's what's I don't know. That's true. I think you can.
Well, I think it's it speaks to the experience of sometimes our coaches, right? If they
Yeah,
also grew up in this like pressure cooker, they
yeah,
came up that way,
yeah,
they're gonna want us to like be more relaxed and just set us up for success.
yeah,
Versus, I feel like maybe like I know Will is like this too. He's definitely much more like let's try something, let's try it
yeah.
just for the heck of it, and to have our coach tell us to do that, it's almost like permission, right? It's almost like, oh, so you won't
Yes.
be mad at us if we have a bad set because
Yeah,
that we're
yeah,
trying, right? Versus, hey, do the living room, and then we do a living room, and it's
yeah,
still not good. It's like, oh my gosh, he tried to set us
yeah.
up for success.
And don't get me wrong, the living room is awesome. It's fantastic.
Yes,
But I think a Herald should have Herald teams with different openings,
yeah,
because
and
that means they're developing their own identity.
yeah, and speaking of which, you mentioned being part of one of the first classes, teams, and things
Mm.
like that. What was that feeling like? Because so it was formed different from Gigantic Man, or the same?
No, yeah, Gigantic Man was the first 401 taught by Matt Besser that was
Mm-hmm,
going to be an official UCB team. This is before Klingon Rubber Party, I think, and all that stuff. So we were the first, and that's before they had a theater. So we're just putting
mm-hmm,
it together. And it was not a good team. I don't think we lasted too long. I think I can only think of 3 people right now that were on a team that are still in the entertainment industry. Myself, Andy Daly, and Paul Shear were all in it. I can't remember
okay,
who else is in it because it was so long ago. We only had a few shows, but the idea was this is going to be a Herald team coming out of the UCB teaching, and our opening was a pattern game with a monologue in the middle of it. So you do a pattern game
mm-hmm,
until you hit a monologue, go back to the pattern game and do another monologue, do a pattern game and do another monologue. Uh, um, and at that time, uh, putting teams together. I remember Besser saying this is like why we have 8 people. And he says like everybody serves a function, 6 people for scenes, 2 people for backups, and that one person should be a wild card. That one person should not have training. That one person should be. I do remember that gentleman. Actually, his name is Mike Ludwig, wonderful
Hmm.
writer. And he was so good. And I think what he was telling us is all of us are trying to be such good improvisers and like proceed with the Herald, but we got to take care of this person. This person has great ideas and is going to tell great monologues and stuff like that. We got to make them look good in the scene. So there's always that wild card character. I do remember being shocked in a class once because he brought in. This is the first time this happened. Besser brought in a woman from Chicago that was just there visiting. So she just sat in on a few classes, and she was doing monologues, and she was the current winner of the Miss Chicago Vagina contest. And that's where it was a beauty contest for vaginas, and she won. And she was also a dominatrix, and all her monologues were about just filthy monologues. And I know Besser said, I just want you to give me your filthiest monologues just to kind of
Hmm.
shock him. And you
Hmm.
know that because he's sitting in the audience. It's just him in the audience just going, deal with that.
Hmm.
And it's like he wanted us to have to take just all this stuff, like just talking about fisting someone. It's just like, I don't want to do that scene. But how can I turn that into an improv scene? So I thought that was interesting. We talk about playing it safe. These are not safe moves. These are like forcing us to have to think on our feet and make it work. And
Yeah,
probably that's why it didn't last so long because we did not make it work.
yeah, and I guess like that's it's interesting hearing you talk about this. It seems like it was a different atmosphere. You
Yeah.
have Bester, who's your coach and running the school,
Yeah.
essentially fucking with you, trying to
Yeah.
mess with you
Yeah.
guys, you know? So the idea that y'all could fail or disappoint anybody is kind of not there,
Yeah. And
you
it's
know?
a
That
part of your training of there are no mistakes, there's only gifts.
yeah.
You got to make a lot of mistakes in order to
Hmm.
learn how to turn them into gifts. And I think that's why, jumping back to the swarm, when Amy was putting us together, after we did 1 or 2 of the forms, she said, how many guys, Heralds, have you guys done as a group? It says about 20, 30, which is more than anybody else at that time. And she kind of sighed, goes, well, you got 500 more to go. And we
Hmm.
all just got depressed after that. And it's like, yeah, just keep doing it, keep doing it. You'll keep pushing yourself a little farther each time. I tried teaching the Herald here, and I've already got people in the very first Herald workshop here in Florida going, when can we do something else? It's like, no, man, we haven't even learned the Herald yet.
Right. I think that's maybe part of this. Maybe that's why
Yeah,
there's a kind of like an impatience or kind of like
yeah, yeah,
a eagerness to do good jobs, to do good sets,
yeah.
that we don't sit in the experimental or we don't sit in the failure too long.
I think, and that's what your indie shows jobs are to do.
Hmm.
If you have to, keep up appearances and do the right thing under certain people, then find those indie shows. Fuck around and fuck around and find out. I think that's the
Yeah.
idea.
So it sounds, and maybe there is no definitive point then, but for you, since this is still kind of like a new territory, you guys are all pioneers in this art form. Was there a point where you were, it felt like things clicked and you're like, oh, I am the master of my own, destiny now.
Oh, I was always full of myself all the way through. I kept getting knocked down a notch over and over again.
Yeah.
A moment where I feel like I got it. You mean like this is
Like, yeah,
it,
that,
or
and not that you ever done learning, but
yeah,
just that you felt good enough to, and maybe even it's even like being asked to coach, or maybe it's being like asked
yeah.
to teach. Like, what are those moments where you're like, oh, I'm not just a student, or I'm not just working at this. Like, I am one of the trendsetters of this, one of the
Oh, I would say
influencers.
it wasn't one moment, but when the Swarm graduated out of Herald Night, and we got our own show. And one of the
Right.
necessities were they did not have enough people to put on stage for the nights. They want to do a show every night, and we were still dark on certain nights. And there's ASCAT, and then there's this and that. So they wanted us to create a new form and a new show, and we developed the mono scene variation of it, and it was two halves: rapid fire scene work and then mono scene. And I think we did like 6 straight years of sold out shows every Friday night. And I would say maybe the second year in, it's like, oh my God. Yeah. Because you get so into it, you don't have that moment to step back, but it's like, yeah, all right. Same people are coming to see the shows now. I get it now. I get it. And it just, yeah, it felt really good and addictive. To the point where I'd rather do that show for free at that time, because I was also working at MTV doing a TV show for MTV, and several
Hmm.
times I said I can't do that shoot. It's on Friday. I have to do my free improv show.
Right.
So I think that was that. It would be that 5 year period of those Friday night shows with the Swarm, and the Swarm begat
Right.
the Stepfathers. The Stepfathers begat the Smoke. So it's always been that crew,
Yeah. And it sounds like having that ownership,
Yeah,
finding like your people, your team
yeah,
to like work on this stuff
yeah.
together is
You're
great.
not even thinking about your work anymore. You just know you can do it, and you will do it. You know.
Great. I guess to wrap up this part of the section is just like I guess any parting words. I know that you constantly see students, so like, what is just some advice or some like attitude adjustments that you'd like to tell to like students out there that may be feeling again like that they're struggling or that they're not quite
Yeah.
getting it just yet.
Well, I guess off the theme of what we've been talking about, there are no mistakes. There's only gifts. Really, if you feel you're failing, you got to somewhere in the back of your mind train yourself and go, excellent. I will learn from this. How can I turn it? Because the next time, you will do it. And I always do this in every class. I talk about those way homer notes. Take charge of your own improv. Give yourself assignments when you're on stage. Teach
Hmm.
yourself. Don't wait for other people to teach you. So that's kind of all that one big thing, and you'll find that moment where there are going to be no mistakes. You're always going to find a way to turn it into a good scene.
I love that, and just for anybody who hasn't had the privilege of studying under you, can you explain way Homer notes? Because I've had previous guests, I've had Anza and Chris Chalaki, and
Ah, yeah,
they brought up that way Homer notes and how much that's
yeah.
really helped them. So explain that philosophy to
So
anybody
yeah,
who's
and I
listening.
say it in every class ad nauseum. So I feel like I have to repeat myself because I want everybody to know this. It's your
Hmm.
job. You give yourself an assignment every time you get on stage, whether it's an improv jam, a real show, anytime that there's that performance anxiety type thing where you are up on stage. Before you get on that stage, what do I need to work on? Editing. Or what do I need to work on? Big characters or small characters? What is it that I don't want to say is my problem, but what do I need to get better at? Then do that show and try to do what you can do. Let's use editing as an example. I want to anticipate my edit, be on top of that scene. Okay, so then after the show, if you did it, awesome. Pat yourself on the back all the way home. On the way home, the time it takes for you to get home, pat yourself on the back and then think, what else could I have done? Where else could I have edited that? Because this is now my strength. I am good at that. And then once I'm going to assume you drive a Prius, David. So
Great. Yes,
yeah,
you're
so
registered.
you get out of your Prius and you drop it. You're not as good as you think you are, David. But you take that time to go home to give yourself that pat on the back. But if you don't do it, beat yourself up all the way home, David. It's like, what could I have done? How could I have done better? Then, when you get out of your Ford F-150,
Yep, that's
drop
right.
it. Yeah, you're not nearly as bad as you think you are. The idea behind that is you're going to obsess over notes, or you're going to obsess over your show. Train yourself to give that time it takes to get home. In New York, it was a 20 to 30-minute subway ride. Oddly enough, in LA, it was a 20 to 30-minute ride on 101. So it was kind of the
Mhm.
same thing. But use that process to think about it. Then once you get home, drop it. And I think that's important, because, all right, I got that. I'm good at this. Move on. All right, I got to work on that again. What could I have done? Then move on. Another teacher used the term basketball memory. Have you heard that
Mm,
term? Like a shooter's
no.
memory.
Mhm.
Three-pointers. If they miss a three-pointer, they have to forget that immediately and shoot another one and
Right.
shoot another one. Uh, uh, which I guess nowadays makes sense with these crazy basketball games. Oh, that's right. No sports for you, David. I apologize.
No.
And the summation of that is be in charge of your own improv. Don't wait for
Mhm.
somebody else to tell you what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. You'll get that, but also it's your job, you know?
Perfect. Thank you so much for walking us through that. We can tell that you've been doing this for years. You've been working with a lot of different students. You nailed exactly what car they drive as well. You got improv students down to a T.
Yeah. Oh, I could tell.
Yeah.
Actually, now that I'm in Florida, I have to say Ford F-150. Pickup truck.
Well,
Everybody drives a
that's
pickup
my
truck.
that's my weekend car.
Is it
It's
really?
no, no.
You're doing well. You're doing well, my friend.
Yeah, so I got two different cars. Well, thank you so much for walking us through the early parts of your improv journey.
Sure.
I'm sure a lot of people will take a lot from that. We're gonna go into our next segment now.
What kind of music are you going to play between these two things now?
It's gonna be it's the same
Okay.
music. I'm pretty lazy.
It's okay.
Uh,
No, no, no. That's fine.
so again,
Whatever.
it's just to refresh our memory. It's gonna be oh, and I'm gonna say it's time for
Yeah.
our next segment now, which is going to be the topic of the week.
Oh, that's nice.
So
Can I just recommend a song for you?
sure.
We Built This City on Rock
We
and Roll.
can't clear it. Can't clear that.
Uh, wow, that was quick. That was a quick
Yeah.
denial.
Uh, well, I wonder what would happen. Let me,
We built this city.
and then I get demonetized
Yeah.
by YouTube. So I wanted to talk to you about this. I think this is always really interesting for those improv nerds out there to hear about how improv has changed. And
Yeah.
again, someone who has kind of been present for a lot of it, and again, also helped shape a lot of it. I think it'd be interesting to hear from your perspective. And also, this might just be more of a monologue. I won't be able to participate until we get to the 20 teens.
Yeah.
I could definitely speak to the last few days before the pandemic. I could talk to the transition to Zoom. I could talk about kind of
Mm,
this reemergence back into the in person. But I'd
yeah.
like to hear, and you kind of touched upon it. But I'd love to hear, like the vibe of New York before UCB once it happened, and then the transition to LA. I'd love to hear about all this
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, it was I had just quit my band Pearl Jam. It was the mid '90s. Grunge was over. I always start every story that way. Actually,
You said you're
UCB,
never gonna make it big.
yeah, Pearl Jam, more like jam. I don't know. I'll work on that story. I think I was talking earlier in a class, in this podcast. It is like a class, though, isn't it? Really?
It's a one
Uh,
person class.
the mid to late 90s, when UCB came to New York, was in the middle of the alternative comedy boom. And I didn't realize it until I was listening to a podcast with Janine Garofalo and David Cross. Is Janine, does everybody know Janine Garofalo? Is that a big
Yeah,
name? Okay,
that's a
everybody,
big
yeah.
name. Mhm.
And those kind of people were doing shows down in the East Village that were just challenging people's, like, what could you do on stage? How offensive could you be for it actually to work? I remember the first time seeing Sarah Silverman at that show. It was at Rebar, was the name of the show, I think. It was because that was the name of the bar, and then they went down to the East Village. I'm not too sure what it was called. But I remember seeing this. Mitch Hedberg was doing shows
Mhm.
at that time. Sarah Silverman, like one of her first shows, she came on in white jeans. Uh, uh, I got on stage, turned around to put a glass of water down, and you could see her bottom of her pants were all bloodied, as if she were having her period. And it's
Mhm.
just like, and that's the kind of comedy people were doing. I don't know if it was New York or the alternative, but there was always like a gasp and a oh, like, can you go that far? So
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
the. And I think, remember earlier, I was talking about Besser and the Miss Nude Vagina Chicago
Mhm.
character. That's what people were trying to tap into. It wasn't all about going blue. It was all about challenging the parameters of where your comedy could go. So at that time, people were making big moves outwards and onwards until they found their moves. UCB, when it opened, uh, uh, a lot of the people from Chicago found a home there to try out their shows. For instance, Tina Fey and Rachel Dratch came to Chicago to do a two-person show. They got on SNL. Amy got on SNL.
Hmm.
More people were coming. There was like a conduit of all these great character people doing great scenes. And of course, at first, I'm going, what about us New York guys? And I'd see the show. Then went, oh, okay, those are really good guys. So, uh, uh, a lot of us at that time, and I'll be honest, my point of view in the 90s was I was not thinking of a career in show business. I just really like acting and improv. If I could make a living, that would be great. But I was making my money bartending, baby.
Yeah.
So that's where I was coming from. And then I started to realize I think Donna Fineglass and Andy Daly were the first two New York regulars doing shows at the UCB within the first year or two that got called up to Mad TV in LA.
Hmm.
Then all of a sudden somebody else got plucked. And then I got uh, what was it? Boiling Point, which was a prank show on
Hmm.
whatever. And then a bunch of us got into Best Week Ever. Paul Scheer,
Hmm.
myself, Nick Kroll, were doing talking head stuff. And it was like, oh, I feel they knew ahead of time what they were doing at their careers. Like they had a
Yeah.
career. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just, hey, this is fun. So I think the first 4 to 5 years of the theater's existence, it was hey, this is a fun little clubhouse where we're doing our thing, and turned into, okay, people are getting gigs from this. Like people are looking for representation. So it took like that 5 year element to grow.
So at that
Uh,
at that point, you mentioned people were kind of seeing it as this clubhouse as a place to like test their boundaries.
yeah.
Was there ever any? Did you feel like there was any an atmosphere of pressure or of competitiveness or anything like that, or even like
No,
was it even
yeah,
like curiosity, like oh we got to see what they're doing over here, or was it just
yeah.
like everybody's doing their own thing, we're all just artists and we're all just chilling?
Yeah, I mean, there's always competition between, like I said earlier, comedy is defensive.
Hmm.
So there's always, what are they doing? We're different than them, that kind of thing. Because everybody wants their comedy and their approach to be unique. So there was that going on there. Uh, I was in a very fortunate position to be in a group called The Swarm. We kind of got there. We were already established before the theater even got open, so we're kind of riding on top of the wave. I'm sure people who were going through the system within the first 2 or 3 years have a different story, that
Hmm.
is be judged a little bit more. But also we were figuring out what the Herald was. When Armando was the first artistic director after the UCB went off and working on their show, I was just remembering the first Heralds. There were no walk-ons or tag-outs or anything.
Oh.
Just do scenes. And then
Hmm.
I remember him saying, "All right, let's add some walk-ons and some tag-outs." Then Heralds would not get past the first beat.
Hmm.
Like literally, the lights would be pulled, and we didn't even get to the second group game because we were taking so long. So then you said, "Okay, no bells and whistles in the first beat and the second beat." And now that's like that's old. That's the only way I can see it done. But we didn't know any better at that time. So the Herald was still learning how to operate. And I think at that time, people were finding new openings that were tried and true, either from Chicago or that, Armando or Kevin Mullaney would teach us and kind of pull off of that.
And was there
Uh,
this like was it like you mentioned the thing with no support in the first piece, but
yeah.
you found it in the second piece. Was there like a eureka moment where you were all like collectively like, wow, that works better, or was it still kind of like it's working a little better? Let's still tweak
Yeah.
this, you know?
It wasn't like a big wow. It's more like, hey, we completed a Herald. I think it was
Right.
literally that was the try there.
Uh-huh.
They didn't tell you. I always think of time. In my mind, I think do a 20-minute Herald so that you can do a 25-minute Herald so that you can do a 30-minute Herald. It's easier to extend time than it is to shorten time. We're at the time where some of these Heralds will go 30 to 40, and they
Mhm.
were just, you could tell that they were hurting, right? You've been in those long Heralds where nobody was editing. You have, Dave. You have.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's my fault. It
uh,
was on me. And I always
uh,
cite this. I always say because that one class you told me it was a really definitive class, but you were the one that told me. I asked you, I was like, "Hey Billy, why are you making us do like I think it was like a 15-minute Herald,
yeah, yeah,
because we're getting all the time." And you said, "Well, first of all, Dave, if people are laughing, it's gonna be 20 minutes." And I
yeah,
was like, "Wow, that blew my mind because I
yeah,
never even considered factoring in." But then you're absolutely right. If you can do it at a much more rushed, like you meant, like a swarmed pace, and you're on
Yeah,
top of
yeah,
each other. Then when there is no one to, blow the whistle on us like you, and it's more relaxed, we can now
yeah,
just expand that and take a little breathing room to jump into
yeah.
a perfect, whatever, 20, 25 minute Harold.
Yeah, it's that's what the ninja is. The ninja on the back wall anticipates when to edit. They know 7 seconds before the scene knows it's dead. So you want to be moving as that's the challenge. You want to be moving as the audience is going, oh, and that's when the scenes fall on top of each other. That's our goal. That I think that's the ultimate goal of a kick-ass Herald. It just goes fast, fast, fast. And
So,
also, yeah, go ahead.
oh, no, finish that thought.
One of the notes that we got once with from Ali Faranakian about a herald is a herald is not 3 beats and then the show ends. A herald goes on forever. We choose to end it at 3 beats. So, in other words, leave the audience wanting more. Don't just sit there and try to end the show on a one-liner. Let the lights decide when the show ends. So, I think that's the idea, and it feels unnatural, but it looks a lot better.
Got it. And I just wanted to ask one more thing about this era, these, first couple of
Yeah.
years. Was what was more important, I guess, the weekend shows, the Ass Cats, the Herald, like how did Herald rank in the hierarchy of like what
Harold
people
was
were
the main
seeing?
night. Yeah, Harold
Hmm.
was the main night. Once the Swarm went out, and then also there was another show that came out called Feature, which was a Besser directed movie class, and that became a big show.
Hmm.
Then all of a sudden, people slowly began to realize, oh, when are we going to get out of Harold Night and do our show? And at that time, you had to develop your own form in order
Hmm.
to get out of Harold Night. Now, Feature was a class that turned into a show. It was not a Harold team. And then I think Respecto Montalban came out and they did their form. Mother came out and created Soundtrack,
Hmm.
was their show. And then all of a sudden, I would say after year 5 or 6, that became more popular. But Harold Night was always the main night. And I remember them changing it from Thursday night to Tuesday night or Monday night or something like that. And everybody going, whoa, whoa. But Harold Night is, it always gets changed around. But it always seems to be the theater and revolves around Harold Night, or did at that time. One of the greatest Harold Nights that I'll always remember was after 9/11, 2001, 9/11, that Herald Night.
Hmm.
And the UCB Theater was part of like right on 23rd, we're on 22nd Street, and you weren't allowed to go below 23rd Street because there was still damage and they were still searching. And I think that happened Monday, and Thursday night was a show. It's like, should we do a show or should we not do a show? And by that time, half the people said no, and the other half said we got to do a show. And I was like part of that group that said I got to get on stage because I'm very sad right now, and I
Hmm.
need to do that. And it was so cathartic and so healing. The beginning was so shaky. It was the only time I've been on stage where I was like shaking. I had to sit in with another group because they didn't have enough people, obviously. Then once that group got done, the second group went up, then the swarm went up, and I gotta say, for me personally, it was a healing event.
Hmm.
So that to me was the most important Herald Night that I've ever been to. And from that moment on, that's what Herald Night is for me. It's cathartic. It's kind of the soul of the theater. That's what it always has been for me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned earlier, this is up also the point when people are starting to see UCB as like a incubator, like a
Yeah.
launching
Yeah.
pad for other people, other opportunities. So,
Yeah.
uh, uh, did you start to see, I guess, like an influx, or was it like a change? Because now
Yeah.
the first class has moved on, and
Well,
now it's like
yeah.
a
Well,
second
now
class.
you're seeing people who took classes that are on Herald teams develop sketch groups. Everybody had their own sketch group because this is before mod teams. There were no
Hmm.
sketch teams. So people were putting up 2 person, 1 person sketch team shows. Naked Babies, which is Brian Husky, Rob Corddry, Seth Morris, and David Bowie, John Bowie. David Bowie was on a improv sketch team. I don't know if you know that. Naked Babies. He was
I heard he was a great
okay.
support player.
Yeah, yeah, but he was more worried about the clothes. And there are quite a few good teams, and people were starting to get writing jobs off of that. And that's like when we realized this does feel more like a writing form, you know.
Hmm.
Also, keep in mind we're talking about now like 5 to 6, like 6 to 10 years in New York. This is the only game in town. There was no other improv really to be had. They had really lucked out because there really wasn't a lot of big stuff going on. There were decent groups like Chicago City Limit, Gotham City, which was an offshoot of Groundlings, had a
Hmm.
theater. But UCB exploded and kind of choked them out and became the team or the place to go. So more people were coming and more people who were more business savvy, like they knew what they wanted out of
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Actually, and while you bring that up, I kind of do want to ask about this because coming up, there was always the big three. There's always options, right? There's always been
Yeah.
UCB, Groundlings, Second City, and IO West. So there was always kind of like this. I wouldn't say it's competitive, but it is like there's different schools of thought
Yeah.
at this time because there are people coming from Chicago, and at this time there's also like short form, people that kind of have their own idea of what improv was. What was it like having people come in saying, "Well, back where I came from, this is how it happens," or.
Yeah, yeah. The first few years we got that.
Mhm,
By year 6, 7, by year 10, we were our own entity. We
okay.
didn't hear from Chicago anymore. I do have a very quick story about Chicago's opinion of New York improvisers because was a people would always come in from Chicago and say Chicago's strong, and I'm going, what the fuck are you talking about? You know, you're in New
Yeah.
York now. But everybody that said it was fucking brilliant. So
Hmm.
it was the first or second Del Close Marathon, which is this 24 at that time 24 hours in the theater, late at night. This is the time when it wasn't sold out. There'd be like maybe 15 to 20 people in at 4 in the morning watching weird ass shows. And I
Hmm.
was sitting in the very back. I think I might have been doing lights too. And I overheard a couple of guys from Chicago who come to do a show there. And basically, Del Close Marathon at that time was for Chicago groups to come to New York to do some shows. But I heard these two Chicago improvisers turn and goes, it just seems like all the New York groups wear capes. And I was like, what? Actually, that is right. Because at that time we were all like doing wrestling improv or
And then you took your cape off. What are
yeah.
you talking
I
about?
literally had 3 different capes for 3 different shows. And I was like, I had a cloak, I had a cape, and then I had a wrestling outfit. So yeah, we were very gimmicky, I think, at that time and doing a lot of fun, wacky stuff. Until we could trust our improv and just be us. It took a
Mhm,
little while, but I would say, yeah, by year 10, we had been established. And I think if there was a strong IO or groundlings presence in New York, that wouldn't
mhm.
necessarily be the case. But because they had no competition, they just turned it into a giant and really kind of took off from there until they came to LA.
Got it. So, did you ever see, or was there ever a time where there was like like a boom or like an influx? And like if so, kind of what was that part like?
A boom or influx? What do you mean? Like
Of people wanting to like join the theater now, like
it happened
because
immediately.
uh,
I was just explaining the other day, before online signups, they would announce when classes would be available, and people would be at the door of the theater on 22nd Street, and they come in one at a time, give them a check, and sign up for a class. I would say just within the first year that it opened up, every class would sell out.
mm,
And when it was announced when the classes were, there would be people in line around the block from like 4 in the morning. Again, early morning, spending the night as if like they're getting an Apple product or something like that,
mhm,
sitting in chairs waiting to sign up for classes. That's absurd. But yeah, they had more. The demand was bigger than what they had, and a lot of us became teachers quickly because of that. I was co-teaching a 101 intensive where I think it was a 1 week intensive where you do 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours at night, or
mhm.
in the afternoon. And it was back when we moved into the bigger theater, and Amy would teach the first half, and I would teach the second half. And everybody would always go, "Where'd Amy go? Who are you?" Hey. And I said, Amy would fuck with me because you'd write down all the exercises. And
Yeah.
she got me to this moment. It's like she would always write down, all right, we did Crazy Eights, we did One Word Story, we did Zip Zap Zup, all these warm-ups, and then she'd always we did Finger Blast, we did Crazy Fours, we did this, and then I'd
Oh
write,
yeah.
and I go, okay, so you guys did Finger Blast? And people goes, what? And that's not an exercise.
No.
That was Amy literally fucking with me. And that
Hmm.
kind of eased me as a teacher. I went, okay. So we did Finger Blast.
Hmm.
And Ben Schwartz was in that class. That was in the very first one-on-one that I was teaching. Thought I'd name drop.
Yeah. That's name drop Sonic the Hedgehog for us.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
Sonic.
what would you say it was like the next stage, the next like phase after
Yeah,
the
yeah.
like.
So yeah, when it blew up and it became that crazy thing, there was a moment where the theater got shut down.
Hmm.
The original theater, which was just this crappy hole in the wall. It was a strip club before. Giuliani shut down all the strip clubs with this new cabaret law, which got us to buy this place, or them to buy this place. It used to be called the Harmony Club, and it was to define it, it was a strip club that strippers would go, "Oh, honey, don't go there." It was a
Ugh.
bad place.
Yeah.
And it was interesting when we reopened the place, we still had people thinking it was a strip club. Come in,
Hmm.
pay the $5 to come in, look around, and then just walk back out again. Uh, uh, Side note, one of the reasons why we do back wall improv is because that theater was so narrow, there were no wings. You couldn't come in from the wings like at IO. You had to stand on the back wall. And to this day, everybody, there's no reason for us on this theater behind me.
Hmm.
We can come off the back wall, off the wings, but we always come off the back wall. Is because the sides of that theater. So it got shut down because we didn't have a fire egress, and it really was at the point where if there were a fire, it would have been a tragic. Lots of improvisers would die. The slow ones would die,
Yeah.
and all of us were slow. So they were shut down for about a half a year, maybe, and they put up like they would rent a space, to do shows there. At that time, I was working on a new form that I created called the documentary, and I did a documentary like a Herald Night, doc night at a bar called Rafifi. So we're all trying to keep it up going on our own. And they were still teaching classes and uh, grabbing places, but it really proved that, okay, we lost our theater, but it is still going strong. And then they moved into the below Grastiti space. And that's when it was pretty much defined, well, we're not going anywhere. Until COVID, we're not going anywhere.
Right. So you could like
So yeah,
survive. You can
yeah,
survive a pretty big thing like that. And I'm kind of curious about this because when UCB closed down in 2020, people still want to keep things going, but there was
yeah,
no official umbrella. So there was a lot of like offshoots. Was
yeah.
it similar, or were you all able to keep that like UCB branding, or was it like no? I'm
Yeah,
actually this is the Billy Merritt experience, you know?
no, yeah, it was actually. I was very purposely working on a form and selling it. I wanted everybody to do the documentary.
Hmm.
Anthony King by that time was the AD, and he says,
Hmm.
Billy, I guess you just want a statue of yourself in front of the theater." And I went, "Huh. Oh, that's a joke." Yeah. So I was pushing that, but
Uh-huh.
it was community that kind of saved it. The UCB worked hard to put it together, and the people that were working for UCB, I was teaching at that time. We're going to be there. We're going to, teach, but the community uh, kept putting the shows together and kept seeing the shows. So, and they did a really good job from the very beginning of building a community. When they introduced the first time they're going to open a theater, like I said, they had 60 people up on the top of the roof of the solo arts. It's like
Hmm.
there shouldn't be that many people on the roof of that rickety old building, but everybody was kind of part of it. We were all
And
called agents of chaos at that time. That was kind of their rolling introduction to UCB. We're all agents, not improvisers.
right, so you're kind of helping
Yeah,
represent it or push it or further
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What year was this at the time that they closed down? You guys were kind of going.
Oh my God, when was that? That would have to have been 2003, 2004, somewhere around there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um.
yeah,
I'm not so good on dates, but when did
yeah.
the transition to LA happen?
For me, it was after like 2008. And it really was by that time. And I think the theater in LA was just starting to go.
Hmm.
I don't quite know the way it was all put together, because I was not there yet. But it was gotten to the point where a lot of us who had been in New York for a while, like the old horses, like, well, you got to go to LA. If you don't, you're
Hmm.
not doing your job. And it's like I remember getting a phone call from Ian going, you should be in LA, man. You should not be there. I don't know why you're there. And it's like, yes, sir. So I kind of felt I had to get to LA. And it was worth it. Definitely worth it. But things are so comfortable in New York. You have your sold
Right.
out show. By that time, I was with the stepfathers. Always had classes, always had the clout and all that stuff. So it really was wonderful. But yes, it was time to move. I just wrapped up a show, a wine show called what was it called? Uncorked with Billy Merritt on a channel that doesn't exist anymore. And we were thinking about a second season, and we could shoot it out of LA. So I was coming to LA for that, but I was really there for uh, uh, to do some teaching and some performing at the new theater. And I think Seth Morris was the AD at that time
Hmm.
when I came. Yeah.
And so, what was that transition like? I'm always curious to hear about like, like the newness of it all because you got to see the newness of New York. And did you notice any differences, or was there any like big, major differences for LA?
Yeah, I mean, when I first came there, obviously my name preceded me, and I did not back it up as well as I thought. Like people, go, we
Mm.
heard you're a great teacher and a coach, and I go, I was like, well, let's try this kind of opening. I was like, what is he doing?
Everybody put on these
So
capes.
yeah, put on capes. All right, if you want to be good, tell me what animal you are.
Yeah.
I remember coaching last day at school, and at that time I was in doing a scene from the Inside Out, fanciful edits. So you do a scene, and the edit would be based on that scene, and it would merge into another scene, which sounded great, but people who just wanted to learn to herald, I wasn't doing them any favors. So I did get to teach a lot of people up front, just kind
Hmm.
of touching the base. I was
Yeah, because you were
mildly.
bringing like a decade of experience,
Yeah, yeah,
people that
yeah.
are still learning a very new thing.
Yeah, I'd say by that time I've been in New York for 12, 13 years,
Hmm.
10 years with UCB. So I've been there since the beginning. I'm going to bring that to the LA stage. And I was mildly upset by the Herald night that I saw. Remember how before I said it was like the heart and soul?
Yeah.
There were new teams trying new stuff out, but I was pissed off at the New Yorkers that were there that didn't rehearse and just showed up and kind of did a grab ass Herald. And I was in that mind going, and because I didn't have any other work to do. I was going, you should rehearse, man. If you're doing Herald Night, you got to rehearse and do a show. And they were doing kind of like half-ass shows. And at that time, I had not been on a Herald team for about 5 to 7 years. And I said, I want to be on a Herald team.
Mm.
So I put myself on a Herald team called Hey Uncle Gary. And that was with Mike Leffingwell. Oh my God, there were so many great people on that team. You just ask me and I won't know. June Diane Raphael was on the team, and but only for a couple days. Oh my God, I can't remember now. Everybody was
That's
on
fine.
Hey Uncle Gary.
I'll look it up. I'll put it
Yeah,
as a little
thank you,
caption.
thank you. There's so many teams and so many names. Everybody in that team was awesome. Let's just put it there,
Yeah,
except for one person. You guys will figure out who it is.
they'll know what it is.
It's Mike Leffingwell.
What was it? In my 401 teacher, was it? Was there ever this like thing of like, oh wow, there's a legend on our team, or were you?
I really
Was it
wanted
pretty
to
cool?
say, maybe it was like, I'm just one of the guys, kind
Hmm.
of thing.
Hmm.
But I really wanted to kind of like, well, if I don't do it, nobody else from New York will. So I
Hmm.
can't say you guys should rehearse if I'm not going to put myself on a team and rehearse. And we did in Johnny Meeks' garage, because I think Meeks was our director for a while, our coach, and then Jim Woods was our director. And I could feel like maybe they were uncomfortable with me being on a team, but I was just trying to say yes and support. And it lasted. It didn't last long enough. After a while, I said, I can't do this, guys. I got to move on. Not to be an ass, but I just needed to kind of do my own thing and then put together the smokes with people who are have been doing it for a while, so I was a little more
But
comfortable.
Did that have the intended effect though? Did that jumpstart people into rehearsing and
I
taking
hope so.
Heraldite
I
more
think
seriously?
so. I think also I was involved in the Herald process, the Herald audition
Hmm.
process, and kind of saying we got to make sure that these teams rehearse. Any team on Herald
Yeah.
Night should be rehearsing. You shouldn't just show up and do a show.
I actually might have to do a little bit of backtracking. I totally forgot to ask you about this, but I'm curious because Herald auditions are coming up again. People are obviously going to be,
Yeah.
nervous and scared about this. But I want to hear about when did that start getting instituted? When did it go from, being picked and
Oh,
chosen to start having to audition?
I don't know, man. I would say not too far after. Well, I mean, it had to have been by 2000, 2001. There were
Hmm.
Herald auditions. I mean, I know I was sitting in on them by 2002, 2003. I've been on 18 of them, and I should not have been. I will say this as a Herald committee member, I have
Yeah.
never walked away from. No, there was one year where I walked away totally comfortable, but I've never walked away going, yeah, what the? I've always walked away like, what the fuck, man? Because what happens in the committee is everybody's like, well, that person's funny. How could you think that person's funny? This person's funny. Because comedy is a defensive art form,
Subject.
and we
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
think certain people are funny and will be good on teams, and we all disagree and we all become passionate about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And since its inception, has it always been like a pretty anxious environment? People always being
yeah,
very, nervous
yeah.
and like putting a lot onto it.
It's always been political.
Hmm.
There's always been who's on a team. If you don't get on a team, you are clearly going to say why not. You have
Yeah.
every right to say that. And there are good and bad reasons why people get on teams and not on teams. And I'm not going to go into that world.
No. No.
That's way too long and strenuous. But there are many different reasons back and
Sure.
forth, and you can't control it. And I think once I moved to LA, I went, gee, that's kind of like every audition I'm going to. That's the problem. And I think for
Yeah.
some people, it's your first foray into on one side rejection and on the other side picking people and rejecting people, like on the committee side and stuff like that. The
Hmm.
only team that was a no-brainer whatsoever was a team in New York called Dillinger. And that was Anthony King was on that team. Lennon Parham was on that team. Sarah Burnett was on that. Just every single person. Joe Wengert was on that team. Every single person was a heavy hitter. And they just auditioned and went, yeah, okay. Well, that was easy. We didn't even ask about it. We didn't even argue about it. So
Hmm.
it's always tricky. It's always going to be hard. And I think the committee should be rotated in and out. It shouldn't, like, I should not have done 18 of them.
Hmm.
And by the last four or five, I made a point not to talk. I kind of more like watch the watchers, but also gave really great suggestions. That was my job. But it's like I should not be here, is what I felt, and I should not have gotten to that point. I should have been told like after year 10, we're going to rotate, get more people in. But
Totally.
whatever. Yeah,
Well, it's good to hear because at least you have this breadth of experience and
yeah,
you've seen too much. It's both reassuring and also kind of like, oh no, but it's nice to hear that things haven't changed,
yeah,
but that it's
yeah.
been that way, it's consistent that way. Things haven't gone like better or worse. It's just like, well,
Oh
that's
man,
that's what it is. That's what audition. That's what the process
yeah.
is.
And they were
So
bitching and moaning with Klingon Rubber Party and Wormhole.
yeah,
We're
since
talking to
the
the
day
very
one.
first teams. How did I
Yeah.
not get on the team? I mean, that's always going to be the case.
All right. I want to be conscious of time here, so just to kind of abridge things, or just kind of
Yeah,
obviously we could talk about this for hours and hours, but
sure, sure.
uh, how do you feel about improv now? How do you feel about the art form and kind of where it's at in the community as
It,
it stands
it's
today?
it is literally corporate now, right? I mean,
Hmm.
in a sense, but the people who are teaching it are passionate, and it's still an art form. We use the pirate robot ninja thing. It's more robot than pirate.
Hmm.
It's much more follow these rules. Let's do it right. Let's do everything correct, type thing, and that's very good and very. I all the rules as I'm teaching at UCB, I totally agree with how we approach it now. I wish we had done it sooner. So it's all going well, but like you said, it's also very it can on the good side, anybody can do it. Everybody feels comfortable and nobody feels left out. I'm hoping as they go through the system and get on teams. On the bad side, we all do the living room opening,
Yeah.
so, we need a little bit of, friction here and there to try new stuff. Not friction as far as arguing, but just differences. This is why I love what Will Hines has done with the world's greatest improv school. That was desperately needed in LA. And I think that's just kudos to him. In Jim Woods and more Sarah Claspel than Jim Woods. Jim Woods is useless. He was critiquing me the other day, and I'm not going to put up with that. Can I tell you his coaching technique when I was on the team, and it
Yeah,
was
I'm curious to
perfect?
hear.
He was
Yeah.
like, he'd always come in a little late. He'd always just come from Taco Bell, and he'd always go, "All right,
Oh
guys,
boy.
I have this gordita left. I ate it." It says, whoever does the best job in this class today is going to get this. And at the end of the class, you go, I'm sorry, guys, I'm going to have to eat it. And he'd eat it in front of us. And it's like, what do you do? All right. I now need to play with this guy.
Wow, that's so
So,
funny.
yeah, that's something you would not do in a UCB class, but you could do at a WGIS class. So I think LA Improv, and I'm here in Florida now, but I think as I left it, it is in a very good place. I think you've got the structure, but you also have the chaos. It's there. So what do you think?
I think again, I only have so much experience in what I've seen, but
Yeah,
I definitely would say before again, like talking about things getting more robotic. I do agree the kind of rules and structure the robots took over. The overlords
yeah,
finally,
yeah,
became the Matrix, and it was just such a pressure cooker of how do I adhere to these rules? How do I
yeah,
make sure that I'm doing pitch perfect heralds? My initiation has to be 100%,
yeah,
no room for error. But I do, once UCB went away, I mentioned this with a couple of other folks, and we all kind of agreed. It was nice in those, the 2021, 2022 years when UCB was still, in like kind of coming
yeah,
back. That we were like, well, we are, like you mentioned, we have ownership. We can make our
yeah,
own shows. We can do our own thing.
yeah.
And if it's not pitch perfect or if it's not hilarious, adhering to game, it is still funny and we're still getting the audience to like it. So,
Good,
and
good.
and same thing with Weegis. I totally agree. The teams there, although they're very good and they're all like practicing and working out really hard, there is no need to be like, but is this what the the ads want?
Yeah,
Our ads are our coaches, so we already
yeah,
know, like, hey, if Will's telling us don't do
yeah,
an opening, or he's telling you to let's get a little bit a faster pace in the second beat, you're like, okay, we can apply that without the
yeah.
pressure of might get cut or might upset somebody.
Yeah, it's hard to have ownership over your own improv when you're trying to please someone else.
Yes.
Uh, but I will say the people who are like who are the in the Herald commit not the whatever the
uh
improv committee, Ronnie
Christine,
Adrian.
Riza, Ronnie, Ali.
Those are great people. Except for one. There's always one that's a problem. No, no. Yeah, every single one of them has a great take on improv, and I think they're all very fairly humble and, not you should do it this way. I think they are in the right place, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, I don't think that this is a result of any
Yeah.
person. I think, like you mentioned, it's just
Oh
become
no.
so corporate. It's
Yeah.
it's got baggage now. It's got at
Yeah.
this point,
Well,
30
and
years
like
of
I said,
baggage.
it's not one person. It's at least my experience. It's the committee of people arguing back and forth as to what we think is funny,
Mhm.
and the people auditioning are kind of stuck in that sieve, going through that gauntlet. Let's use
Yeah,
that word. Going through the gauntlet of that person's funny, going back and forth.
yeah.
So it's just there
I
is
think
no
for
perfect way
yeah
to do this, but I think they're as
for
close
me
as they can.
for me personally, I don't take it personally. I do know at the end of the day, this is the result of late stage improv, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
we just you can kind of see it with like these newer communities opening up.
yeah.
They don't have the baggage. They don't have all the different opinions, all the different rules. And I'm pretty sure you also have this weightlessness or this freeness in Florida with your Harold
Actually,
classes.
I'm kind of going, man, these people need structure down here. And they need to have structure that's fun. That's the other
Hmm.
thing. The Herald is fun.
Mhm.
It better be fun, or it just feels like work. So I'm noticing that today. It's like, yeah, if I want to get a community going here, this has got to be fun for them, and they're all going to get good at improv doing the Herald, because all the Herald works on all your improv muscles,
Mhm.
and then they're going to start doing other stuff, and it's going to be even better. So
All right, great. Well, thanks so much for again talking us talk through this. I know we had to condense a long history into a
yeah,
quick amount of time. There's just one other segment we want to do here. It's our last segment, which is going to be our hot improv takes. No music for that one. That one's just straight.
we
Uh,
built this city. I'm just going to have that in my head.
hot improv takes is just a quick little rant, like you would do as an improv opening about an improv trend that you want to see more of, less of. I think I already can hear what you're going to say based off what we said, but just a chance to kind of express a hot take that you normally would not say, as a
I'm
part of like
gonna
a school.
I'm gonna take a turn and say, well, yeah, I guess it's not a trend. Yeah, learn the Herald, but try new forms, try different things while doing the Herald, and then take it back to the Herald. Like the movie form is a Herald, but you're using the movie form. So don't just do a Herald so that it becomes vanilla to you. Try
Mhm.
different things. And again, at WGIS, there's all sorts of different fun things. And because I have those students, I'm teaching different things. And I came up with a new form, which is a variation of the Pretty Flower, which is called the anthology. I won't go into it, but if I didn't have new people trying new things, it wouldn't come there. So don't just do what everybody tells you. Find new things to do too, and don't be afraid of creating new things. Uh, do it in an indie show. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what they're for.
yeah,
And then so for my hot, I agree with that. Thanks so much for pushing it out there. I also have hot take, and just in honor of you and the Robot Pirate Ninja,
yeah.
my hot take is if you're a robot and you're only making robot moves, then you're not really a robot. The thing that makes you a robot is if you take that big swing, you make that choice that you're not thinking of, something that's illogical, but then you
Very
have
good.
to put it back together.
Yeah,
Now I need to
yeah,
follow the rules. And similarly with the pirate, if you keep swinging and swashbuckling
yeah,
back and forth, you're not doing it make any sense. But if you know the direction, or you know the whatever what pirates do,
yeah,
the heading that you're headed
yeah,
towards, then your swashbuckling will actually, you'll land on the right boat and you're going to take over that ship. Otherwise, you're going to swing straight into the ocean and the
yeah.
wrong side of the boat.
And once you find that balance, you become the ninja.
That's right.
Yeah,
Who can do logic. Ninjas famously love
yeah.
math and love taking over other shit.
They do. They're famous mathematicians, but you just don't see their work.
That's right. Who do you think? Who do you think built the calculators? It was the
Yeah,
ninjas. All right. Well, thanks so much, Billy. We appreciate you taking the time. I know you have to get
absolutely.
going soon, but please send me those plugs. I'll put them in here as a
Oh yeah.
quick little list.
Oh yeah, for those of you auditioning for Herald, I got 3 slots open on my 401 online, starting next week or the week after. I'll send all the posts to you. I'll send that stuff to you.
Yeah, and I just want to just wrap up by saying, Billy, you've been a great teacher, coach, mentor to me. You're such a asset to the community. Everybody owes a lot to you, and your name has come up so much in this podcast. I just had to get you on. So
Good.
for those of you listening, if you've never taken a class, this is a perfect time to do so. He's got a lot of classes online, so I'll put all those links up there. But thanks so much, Billy, for coming in and sharing your knowledge with us.
Absolutely, David. Anytime for you. I feel honored to be on this show.
The honor is all mine, but
Yeah,
appreciate
I
it.
know. I know. I'm just trying to be nice.
Well, I appreciate the sense of niceness. But, thanks, and take care, everybody. Thanks for listening.
All
All
right.
right. Thank you,
Uh,
sir. I really appreciate it.
yeah, anytime, David. That was a lot of fun. Thanks for
Yeah.
listening to me.